Hi, welcome to episode 3 of Zig Zag, a quick look at the book of Revelation as we zig and we zag through the book and see the pattern that begins to emerge as God is working. We saw in the previous episode, it opens on the Isle of Patmos, and all of a sudden there is a zigzag, if you will, and because of that isolation on Patmos, we are then able to look into heaven, and John has the opportunity to see the glorified Christ. Both things happening, both important. So in this particular episode, we come back and we see the next thing that happens that follows up what we just talked about. On earth, we once again pick up the story. And on earth, the story that we're picking up is the story of the 7 churches. This is found in Revelation chapter 2 and goes into Revelation chapter 3. So these are the 7 churches. These are the churches that would have been on John's circuit, if you will. They were places that he was familiar with. They are places that he would be familiar to the congregations. And so they are described there in Revelation 2:3, what's going on in those churches. That's a whole different study, and we're not going to study that specifically. We're not going to break it down. But as I told you, what happens is, though, over and over again in Revelation, just when we're shown one thing and we begin to see and take inventory and begin to understand it, then all of a sudden there is a zigzag that takes place, and the next thing we know, we're moved into the heavenly realms. And so on or in heaven, once again, we'll do it that way, there's something else that begins to happen. And when we get there, we begin to discover in Revelation 4, into chapter 5, what's happening in heaven is that we see the throne at the beginning of the tribulation. The action moves from earth, where the churches are being talked about and some information given about them and what's happening and what's good and what's not. And all of a sudden we go back into heaven, and in heaven there is a glimpse of the throne, a celebration, if you will, of the heavenly hosts that are gathering around the throne. And this is the beginning of the onset of events that lead to the second coming of Christ. These 2 chapters, by the way, talk about the greatest scene of worship we have in the entire Bible, but they also represent a courtroom scene in which God is preparing to judge evil on earth. And so, we've gone from an island, and we've taken a quick trip into heaven, and now we're back on earth, where we're looking at the state of the church on earth, and some judgments that need to happen. But then we go back in, we see this big glimpse of what this worship event is happening in heaven, and this amazing moment where we're reminded again that God is in charge, and God alone is worthy, and God alone is the one who is fit to judge, because that's what's getting ready to happen, and we know that happens in the book of Revelation. And so we have the zig and the zag once again. We move from earth, we move into heaven, and what we see is a contrast, but a reminder of who's in charge. And no matter how bad things look on earth, in heaven, there's always something bigger going on. I think that sometimes as we look at the news and we look at the world around us, we easily can get overwhelmed. And we often think to ourselves, and we shrug and we say, somebody needs to do something, and what in the world is going on, and where is God? Well, God is in charge. And God is going to do what only God can do, what only God is qualified to do, and what God is certainly more than equipped to do. And He will make things right, and He will balance the books. And so that next zigzag reminds us of that as the setting is now in place for these end-time events to unfold. We'll take a look at the next zigzag that you find in the book of Revelation, and we'll do that in our next edition. So until then, you go back and you can bookmark these, see how it works, and we'll give you something else to study next time.